I found out what really happens to people who ask too many questions in my family. Growing up, I always thought my family was just really private. You know how some families share everything at dinner and others barely talk? We were the second type, but it wasn't until my cousin Danny went missing that I started to realize our family's version of private was something else entirely. Danny was the kind of guy who asked questions about everything. Why did Great Uncle Vincent really move to Florida? What happened to the money from Grandpa's life insurance? Why did we never visit Mom's side of the family anymore? At every family gathering, Danny would corner someone with his theories and observations, trying to piece together our family's history like some amateur detective. The adults always brushed him off with nervous laughs and quick subject changes. Danny's always been too curious for his own good, they'd say, ruffling his hair. But there was something in their eyes when they said it, something that looked almost like fear. When Danny turned 25, he started getting really serious about genealogy research. He'd show up to Sunday dinners with printouts from ancestry websites and old newspaper clippings he'd found at the library. He was obsessed with filling in the gaps in our family tree, especially the relatives who seemed to just disappear from records around the 1980s. My parents and aunts would get visibly uncomfortable whenever Danny pulled out his research folders. They'd start clearing dishes earlier than usual, or suddenly remember important phone calls they had to make. Uncle Ray would always change the subject to sports or work, but Danny never took the hint. He just kept digging. The last time I saw Danny was at my grandmother's 85th birthday party in March. He pulled me aside in the kitchen and showed me something that made my blood run cold. It was a death certificate for someone named Daniel Kovac, born the same year as Danny, who had died in a car accident 3 states away. "Look at this," Danny whispered, his hands shaking as he held the paper. Same first name, same birth year, same month. And get this, the guy died 2 weeks after filing a missing person report for his own family member. He explained that he'd been tracking similar patterns for months. People with names similar to questioning family members, all dying in accidents or disappearing right after they started investigating family mysteries. Danny thought someone was creating fake death certificates to cover up something bigger. I told him he was getting paranoid, that it was just a weird coincidence. But Danny grabbed my arm and said he'd found evidence that our family wasn't who we thought we were, that our last name wasn't even real, and everyone had been living under false identities since before we were born. He said he was going to confront Dad about it the next day. That was on a Sunday. By Wednesday, Danny was gone. His apartment was cleaned out, his car was missing, and his job said he'd called in his resignation. Just like that, my cousin who asked too many questions had vanished. The family's reaction was what really unsettled me. Instead of panic or concern, there was this collective sigh of relief. Danny was always talking about moving somewhere new, Aunt Linda said at the dinner table. Good for him for finally doing it. But I'd known Danny my whole life, and he'd never mentioned wanting to move anywhere. He was saving up for a down payment on a house 3 blocks from his mom. Something was wrong, but when I tried to bring it up, the conversation would die instantly. I started paying closer attention to family conversations after that. How certain topics would create uncomfortable silences. How questions about our history would get deflected with jokes or distractions. How some relatives I remembered from childhood were never mentioned anymore, like they'd been erased from our family's memory. My dad noticed me getting curious about the same things Danny had been interested in. He pulled me aside after dinner one night and said something that still gives me chills. "Son, some families have secrets that are better left buried." Danny forgot that, and now he's paying the price for being too smart for his own good. When I asked what he meant by paying the price, Dad's face went completely blank. He said Danny was fine, just living his new life somewhere else, but he wouldn't look me in the eyes when he said it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the relatives who'd supposedly moved away over the years. Cousin Michael, who asked too many questions about Grandpa's military service. Aunt Ruth, who wouldn't stop digging into Mom's first marriage. Uncle Frank, who kept pushing for details about the family business. All of them had supposedly relocated for jobs or relationships, but none of them had kept in touch. The next morning, I did something that probably saved my life. The rest of the story is on my channel or linked below.